From the studios of Farm Journal Broadcast, this is U.S. Farm Report.
Welcome to U.S. Farm Report. This weekend, we're on the road. We're at the Cattle Convention here in the Music City. I'm Tyne Morgan, and it is a packed show over the next 60 minutes. Already tight U.S. cattle supplies are even tighter than expected. USDA now says the U.S. cattle inventory has fallen to a 75-year low.
The net effect is we've continued to get smaller in this industry, and we are not growing at this point.
How that could shape the cattle industry for years to come, and just how high cattle prices could still climb.
We're not convinced we've seen the high.
But cattle producers in the South are on edge as New World screwworm inches closer to the U.S.
The screwworm, however, that is something that we really cannot control at all.
Plus, a cattle call that's fueling a brand new calling.
And so I tried really hard to relate that cattle call to that feeling, and that's kind of where that inspiration really came from, was that idea.
Raised on a ranch, one country music singer is reconnecting with his roots through a powerful new song. Well, there was a lot of news this week, starting with the EPA saying farmers will soon have more freedom to fix their own equipment. It builds on earlier action by the Trump administration to address diesel exhaust fluid or DEF, an issue that has frustrated farmers for years. EPA says equipment manufacturers have misused the Clean Air Act to restrict access to repair tools and software, forcing farmers to rely on authorized dealerships for even basic fixes. But EPA Administrator Lee Zeldin says the new guidance clarifies that farmers can temporarily override emission systems when making repairs as long as the equipment is returned to compliance. Now, officials say the goal is to reduce downtime during planting and harvest and significantly reduce repair bills.
Today, we are issuing guidance out of the Trump EPA to make abundantly clear that if you own your farm and other non-road diesel equipment, you have the right to fix it. The Clean Air Act was written to ensure clean air for all Americans, not to lock farmers into expensive repairs.
In the aggregate, this is about a $48 billion savings. And how do we get that number? It's farm by farm. It's about $33,000 per repair. You add in the time that is spent. The loss of yield could be up to $4,000 of yield for the average farm.
And here's a closer look at how much the Trump administration says this could save producers. SBA Administrator Kelly Loeffler estimates the changes could reduce annual operating costs by roughly 10%, with repair costs potentially dropping by as much as 80%. The announcement builds on guidance issued last summer addressing diesel exhaust fluid or DEF system failures. While this week's right to repair guidance lets farmers temporarily override emission systems when making repairs, it does not change DEF requirements. But on Tuesday, EPA then announced it's also demanding data from major equipment makers to pinpoint why tractors and trucks are shutting down or losing power during critical planting and harvest times. Well, the Treasury Department also releasing its proposed rule for 45Z this week. It's guidance that biofuels groups have been waiting for 3.5 years. You'll remember that 45Z refers to the Clean Fuel Production Credit. It's a federal tax incentive that provides tax credits based on the carbon intensity of the fuels produced. There's expectation that the tax credit will trickle down to farmers. The credit has been available since January 2025, but the rules around it were unclear. And while some questions have been answered for farmers, questions still remain.
On the farmer side, we need this brand new tool that was announced here in the document today called the 45Z FDCIC, which stands for 45Z Feedstock Carbon Intensity Calculator. Before this announcement, there was two existing feedstock calculators, one developed by the U.S. Department of Energy called the GREET FDCIC. It's part of their R&D GREET model. And then there was a USDA FDCIC that the Biden USDA put out last January, and we know they've been updating that.
We removed, it gets a little technical, but we removed indirect land use score that effectively doubled the value for biodiesel and renewable diesel from 30 cents a gallon to 60 cents a gallon. So that was a big change. And then we also limited the tax credit so it's only available to feedstocks produced in North America. So we no longer are being flooded with Chinese used cooking oil.
And Sinski says with the right policies, including continued growth in crush and biodiesel, domestic demand could replace 20% of the Chinese market within the next 2 years. Well, the cattle industry here is really keeping a close watch on efforts to keep the New World screwworm out of the U.S. And just recently, USDA announced it would begin dropping sterile flies into Texas. This graphic here is showing the new dispersal zone, which now extends 50 miles into southeast Texas. It's an area along the U.S. border. Recently, Mexico reported 8 new cases of the pest in that state. They say the key to slowing down the threat is being proactive. This follows Texas Governor Greg Abbott's actions last week, issuing a statewide disaster declaration to better equip the Texas NWS response team to prevent the potential spread of the fly. Well, the U.S. has worked out a trade agreement with India. It's reported India will partly open up its highly guarded agriculture sector.
Under this trade deal, India has agreed to buy petroleum, defense goods, and aircrafts from the U.S. and some U.S. ag products in exchange for stopping buys of Russian oil and lowering trade barriers. The U.S. says it will also reduce India's tariffs from 50% to 18%. And the U.S. also signing a trade deal with Argentina this week. The White House says the country has opened its market to U.S. live cattle, allowing for a tariff rate quota of 80,000 tons of U.S. beef. It also committed to allowing market access for U.S. poultry.
Well, that's it for news. Well, when we come back, U.S. cattle supplies, we talked about it, are the lowest in 3/4 of a century. But there's another risk putting the dairy industry on edge. That's our Farm Journal report next.
U.S. Farm Report is brought to you by Pioneer. 100 years ago, one seed changed everything. See how it all started at pioneer.com/100.